Hello and welcome to another episode of Off the Rock, your weekly rugby breakdown with me, John Ferguson. Well, today I'm back with Lachie from Scrumbags. Lachie, we're here to review the TRC round 4, how you're feeling in for what is actually yet again another must-win clash, another must-win game for all the sides if they do want to get their hands on that trophy.
Oh, you got to love the TRC. It's always a sprint. It's a wonderful thing, and the fact that it's still up for grabs, Fergo, after 3 weeks is so exciting. So I'm keen to rip into all four teams because they are massive and massive changes across the board as well.
Yeah, there's a couple of coaches that have swung the axe, obviously. I don't know if it's nerves. I don't know if it's, by necessity. Some of them are, some of them aren't. We're going to get into all that and more. But just before we get there, I just want to say a massive thank you to all the subscribers, all those people that comment on the channel, all the people that I'm down there discussing rugby with you, that support this channel with your subscriptions. And I'd love if you guys continue doing so. If you like the channel, if you like the content, please do make sure to subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. You just got to have a YouTube account, which you can make with an email. And that really helps me to continue grow the channel. I'm so close to hitting that 1K mark. And if you guys help me get there, I would be oh so grateful because that is part of why we do it. But for the majority of why we do it is because we love the game here that they play in heaven. So you support me. And obviously don't forget to support the boys at Scrumbags as well on their pod platforms. But now we've gotten that out of the way, Lachie, shall we get into the teams?
Can't wait. Let's go.
Today, we're going to start with the Wallabies, and the Wallabies have made some changes. Now, Joe Schmidt making 4 changes in the starting lineup and a couple of more on the bench. Let's start with the starting 15. There's some big changes there, Lachie.
A massive. I think we should always start in the pack. I think that's the best place to start, lay that foundation. And it's in the engine room that I'm really excited to talk about. Jeremy Williams comes into the starting side. No Nick Frost. For as long as I can remember, we've had Frosty probably since the start of the Schmidt era. And the big fella's being rested, a bit of a sore back. So he gets a trip out of the 23, but it also brings in a massive person to cover that bench spot vacated by Williams. How excited are you to see Salakaia-Loto back in the mix?
Salakaia-Loto is back in the 23. It's what I've been calling for so long. Finally, Schmidt decided to hop on off the rock and listen to the boys. That's what needed to be done earlier. But I'm so happy that he's back. So happy, in fact, that I've prepped a nice little TikTok/Instagram reel for you guys to enjoy. And it was just literally 90 seconds of him wreaking havoc on the British and Irish Lions across those 3 tests that he played, or the 3 games rather that he played. So do check that out on Off the Rock TikTok and Instagram. It was really fun to make, and it was really fun to think about how he can impact this game. So he's a really hard, abrasive ball running player, and we will talk more about him in just a minute. But I agree with you up front, Jeremy Williams. It's interesting because you lose the significant height of Nick Frost, and he's been doing so well at the line out for us. And I just think that because the Argentinians have made a couple of changes in their pack as well, a couple of really experienced guys coming into the pack. It is really interesting to see Jeremy Williams. Now, both our locks are sub 2 meters, which won't be the case for the Argentinians. So I actually do think that's quite a big change there. Obviously, James Slipper as well coming in for Tom Robertson. I feel like Tom Robertson didn't actually, we wasn't able to get the impact that we wanted for him at the scrum. We saw how much the Argentinians battled with the All Blacks scrum, and we did really well against South Africans. And I just think that we weren't able to apply the blowtorch the way that we wanted to. All granted that there were a lot of free kicks for poor engagement, early engagement, late engagement, pulling away, and so on. But I just feel like had our contest been a little bit better there and our form been a little bit better as a unit, we would have gotten more pay out of that. So they're the only 2 changes in the pack. Overall, are you happy with that pack, or would you have liked to see some more change?
No, I like the change. I'm interested to see how Hooper and Williams will go, not just as a sort of sub 2 meter pairing, but just how they run and operate the line out. You'd expect the lion's share to go to Williams in that regard, like he does with the Force. But Tom Hooper's been playing a lot of 6 sort of in Wallaby Gold. It is a big step up to move into the engine room. So I'm excited for him and I'm excited to see how he's used with Salakaia-Loto. But you've got to give a shout out to James Slipper. He's going for cap 149 against the RGs. If he takes the field, which we expect he does, as starting prop, he's going to overtake Richie McCaw on the all-time caps list. He'll be outright third. It's an amazing achievement, and people are sort of casting forward to 150. Willie catch, the likes of Alan Wynne-Jones. I'm thinking right here and now we have a living legend playing for the Wallabies, and he deserves every success. So excited to see him. Great swap for Robertson. I think that's 100 plus more experience tapped to run out at loose head, and then Belly off the bench is excellent.
Oh, it's honestly incredible. I think, it's even up towards 115, 120 caps more than Tom Robertson. And they're only, I think they're only 7, 8 years apart. So even if he played every single one of those, he wouldn't catch him. So it's, until he got to the same age. So it is really incredible. I think you make a really interesting point on Frost and not being there, and Williams and Hooper. They both feel like the same kind of player. Neither one's really very rangy or very like an elite athletic kind of guy like Frost is. We know that once he gets in open space, he can turn on the turbo shoes and jet and really go. So it will be interesting to see what we kind of lose with that. But both of them, I think, are a little bit more confrontational in defense, which I think is going to be so important for the Wallabies. So we'll keep an eye on that pairing. Very exciting to see how they go. Very similar players in their confrontational style. Then in the back line, we've got to talk about Kane Edman being in the number 10 jersey for his first maiden start of his Test career.
Yes, super exciting for Little Red. I'm super keen to see how he goes running the cutter. It's an interesting pairing with Nick White, but again, it's a continuation of what we've seen where Joe Schmidt will not put two inexperienced players in a partnership. He will support them with caps. So Nick White goes in with Tane, wonderful support, and another couple of new faces in the back line as well. So I'm excited to see how that 9-10 combo, but it's a pretty rare thing to see Edmed slotted between two players he's unfamiliar with. Yes, White's experienced, but to have Hunter Paisami moving into the 12 jersey immediately to his outside, that's a big deal for Tane. So I'm excited to see how he handles that pressure and the possibilities, I guess, of that new centered pairing as well. What do you make of these changes?
Yeah, I think Tane's really interesting. Makes me kind of nervous. We have seen that he previously, what we saw from him for the last time that he played, starting a test, that was against the AUNZ game that we saw him playing there. I think he just struggled to be able to. Obviously, that was a completely different side, and the systems are completely different to what the Wallabies are playing. But I just feel like he struggled to be able to get a real handle on how they wanted to play. And now Kane hasn't really played 10 yet. He kind of had to play 12 when he came in for the injuries when he did come on in South Africa. So it'd be really interesting to see him run the cutter. And I think that he just needs to remember that his job is to get the team in the right position and the right places of the field, which is something that Tom Liner does so well. So I think that he is a baller. He's a tough guy, but he just needs to make sure that he doesn't get caught in overplaying in his own half. If you get into the halfway meter line, their 40-meter line, feel free to throw the long balls that James O'Connor does, because that's what's been getting us on the front foot. And that's the big difference that James O'Connor made when he came on last week in Townsville. But I just think he needs to focus on really playing that smart test match rugby, because otherwise the Wallabies are again going to find them in an instance where they're kind of conceding too many points early, because we know how dangerous the Argentinians are. So that's the big task for Tane, to just not get overawed by the occasion and just play territory and make sure that he gets a team which is doing really well in the right parts of the field. Hunter Paisami is another player that I've been really keen to see him in there. Very much more of a north-south kind of player, not bigger than Lenny Kitao by any sorts, but definitely more direct in the sense that he doesn't necessarily have the fleet foot work at the line that Ikitau does. I think it'll be interesting to see him and Suoli together. How are you feeling that's going to work?
I'm really excited. The Ikitau Suoli midfield is what many believe will be the midfield going through to the World Cup, and I like that it's an option. And I like what we saw, especially against Argentina. Their combination is growing and developing. It's 10 games now together. I like the look of it, but we need alternatives. We need options, because it's rare that you get through a big tournament without key injuries. So the idea of Paisami, who had a fantastic 2024 that was still injury riddled and still had his troubles this year, I think we need to see him back in that gold jersey, and to give him the freedom to link up with someone like Suoli. That's two very exciting attacking prospects. So I think there'll be rust. I think there naturally has to be when you've got a 10, 12, 13 that are unfamiliar. but so exciting at that attacking potential. You've got to remember that, yes, Paisami is a direct north-south player, but he has developed his kicking game in leaps and bounds over the past 3 years in particular. And the thought of him creating space on first phase that Suoli'i can exploit second phase around the corner is really, really exciting. So I'm really excited to see Paisami back in a gold jersey, mate.
Yeah, so am I, and I'm glad you mentioned the kicking game because that is something that he has that Lenny Kitau doesn't. Lenny Kitau is not a known kicker, short or long, for a while. He definitely has a massive left boot on him, but it hasn't really been utilized, especially in exits, which I'm still surprised about by Joe Schmidt, particularly as he went to James Lope a lot whilst he was at Ireland. So that is very surprising. But I think that. As you mentioned, a bit of a more varied skill set in that sense. And I think that will be really interesting to see, particularly in defense, because I think Paisami and Suoli are both very confrontational tacklers. Lenny Kitau not so much in that space. So it will be really interesting to see how the Argentinians look to work that. Because if they're running directly at those two, I promise you, it doesn't matter if it's Chocobaras, they'll go backwards because those two know how to whack. Really, really exciting. The back three stays the exact same. You've got Corey Toole, Max Jorgensen, and Andrew Kellaway. So, I think what we're hoping really is just to see more of them because last week we just didn't quite, we had to work to get them into the game and the kicking game wasn't quite bearing enough fruit for those kind of players. So we just want to see them with more ball in hand, right?
Oh, exactly. We saw exactly what Corey Toole can do with 3 meters gas and a bit of ball behind the line against South Africa. And Kellaway, he doesn't have the speed that he used to, but he runs a main line, and we know what Jorgo's capable of as well. So the quicker we can get the ball to them, the better. But as every coach from sixth grade to first grade will tell you, you got to earn the right to go wide. So there's a huge remit for the Wallabies pack and midfield to get them that go forward ball that allows them to exploit what are a couple of new combinations out wide for Argentina as well.
Yeah, exactly. And before we go to Argentina, we'll just wrap up with the bench because I'm stinging to get there. And we will go straight to the changes. So the changes on the bench are Josh Nasser, the Queensland Reds hooker, comes in for Brandon Pang and Mosa. I haven't actually heard whether that is injury or not, but that doesn't appear to be injury. And I think it's just managing minutes from a player who played very little Super Rugby in the end and who came in has now played a lot of games ever since that First Nations Pacifica game. So that's really exciting for Josh Nasser, who had played a couple of games early for Joe Schmidt there. And then obviously we've got Lukan Salakaia-Loto who on the bench, who's the only other change. What I will say about Lukan, and while Nasser has to nail its throw, Lukan has to remember that he has to help this side remain on the good side of the penalty count, but he also brings a vast line out experience and he is so good in that space. And that's not actually what we haven't had anyone that experienced who can line out jump and take single hand takes. So although I've been talking and hyping a lot about Lukan's ball running ability, it's his discipline and his set piece experience, as well as extra weight in the scrum, that is really going to play a material difference.
I think a lot of people forget too, Fergo, that he is the most experienced lock in this Wallaby squad. He's got more caps than Skelton, than Frost, than Williams, than Hooper. He's pushing towards that 50 mark very quickly. This will be his 42nd cap if he gets on. So that's a lot of miles under the legs in the test arena. He knows his way around, and it's pretty common knowledge that he was a fierier character, even more so than he is now in his youth. He went over to Northampton. He'd learned a bit more craft around that lock and six role, and he's come back a better player. Measured player, a father, he's matured, and it's really exciting to see what he can do. Because my God, has he bided his time? We've been banging down the door trying to get him back in the team, Fergo, with our very limited reach, I might add. But it's great to see a big man with 40 plus caps be able to come back into this side. He has so much to offer, and I think it's going to be it's a different kind of aggression. This Lukan Salakaia-Loto from previous years.
Yeah, absolutely. But he definitely knows how to get under the skin of players, as we saw during the Lions series. He definitely knows how to fling someone around by the jersey. What we'll do now is we'll go straight to the Pumas side to be able to wrap up their side. The pack, they're doing a little bit of roundabouts. They've got Joaquin Oviedo, the big number 8 ball running carrier, back rower, coming in for Pablo Matero. Had a very quiet game last weekend. He really was invisible, and it didn't add too much impact. So I guess that's what Felipe Contepomi, their coach, is trying to get out of him from coming off the bench. And likewise, they've transported back Molina and they bring out Guido Petty into the second row. That is where that experience is going to come from. And I think against a Hooper and a Jeremy Williams, an untested locking combination, a pairing, that is going to be really, really intriguing to see how they deal with that experience from Guido Petty. What are you seeing from the forwards? Because they are the only two changes that I saw. And obviously, they've got a couple of really big hitters in the back row alongside Oviedo.
I think Oviedo's form against the All Blacks was incredible. He was easily, I think, the Pumas' best player across those first two games, maybe up there with Gonzalo Garcia as the real game breakers for Argentina. And he has everything to prove, right? He was demoted or, used as a finish or whatever you want to call it. No one wants to be on the bench. People want to start. They want to rip in from the get-go. And I think Oviedo is the kind of player who's young, who's hungry, who's pushing Matera, who's been the heartbeat of that back row for so long. I love that there's now competition for that starting 6-8 role. And I think it'll actually bring out the best, not just in Oviedo, but in Matera. You know what he's like. He plays in Sydney. He's done it so many times. He's beat the All Blacks there. He's had amazing performances on Australian soil before as well. And it's super exciting to think that, maybe 55, 60-minute mark, you get a fresh Pablo Matera coming in and terrorizing the Australian ruck. So I think it's a good move to bring the most out of them. You already mentioned that change in the locking department as well. But for me, the biggest change is the one that they've announced in the back line. Having Rodrigo Isgro come on and have a sevens matchup with Corey Toole is so exciting to me, Fergo.
Oh, it's mouth-watering. And one of the things that I learned from Frankie Degas, the Argentinian journalist that I interviewed a couple of weeks ago ahead of game one, is that his aerial game is something that the Harlequins particularly and Filippo Contepomi have noted. And so that is going to be a really big step up. Delgay, extremely quick, extremely fleet-footed. But if Isgro's bringing that X factor in the air, that is going to be something they're going to go to, particularly if the ball is a little bit greasy with the weather still yet to be still undecided about how the conditions are going to be for Saturday. So we're hoping for A1 running rugby on a dry track, but at this stage it's looking very uncertain. So the Wallabies are going to have to be very aware of the threat of Iskro on the ground, but also in the air, and that threat that he brings, that is going to test something like an inexperienced centre defensive pairing in Paisami and Joseph Akuso Suali'i. So that's very exciting. Quick touch from you about how you're seeing this game going to play out. What are the tactical chess games that Felipe Contepomi and Joe Schmidt are going to be playing? Where is this game going to be? Where is this game going to be taken to?
Well, I think you already mentioned it just before. I think this one's won and lost off the boot. We are expecting a greasy service, a bit of rain. It's been a little wild and woolly down in Sydney, so I'm excited to see who is the smarter team. I don't think the bigger team or the more physical team wins this. I think it's who's got the grey sorted out, and so much pressure is then put on the likes of Santiago Carreras and Tane Edmed. You'd have to think the experience that Carreras and Malaya have combined probably shades Kellaway and Edmed, but I like that they've given Tane Edmed the start on his home track as well. This has been noted by a couple of other pods and commentators as well, but it's almost easier for a player like Tane Edmed to start in this game rather than come on with the pressure of a finisher. You're in familiar ground. You've got a familiar fullback, a familiar winger, a familiar 13 that you've played in and out with through Super Rugby. It's really exciting opportunity for him. And so I just hope he grabs it by the horns. That the 10 has been such a focal point of discussion for eons in Australian rugby. I want a couple of other competitors to rise up. No Tom Liner means that there's opportunities these next few weeks, and who knows what's happening with James O'Connor. So I think the boot determines this one. But I'm not game enough to pick a score yet, Virgo, so I'll push that one down the line. How do you see it going?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did. We'll get to that all right after we've reviewed the entire round of the Rugby Championship. I think the Wallabies will expect more out of their set piece. They probably didn't get as much out of their driving maul that they wanted, although they did get one try from memory. And then also you will be looking at the likes of the scrum, just being able to milk a couple of penalties, being able to set that as a base, as a foundation to be able to launch the likes of Paisami and Suoli into the teeth of the Argentinians. The kicking game you and I have already touched on, and as we've mentioned, the Argentinians will look to dominate the air with Mateo Carreras, the whippet on one wing, and Iskro, the soaring eagle on the other. I think that it is really, really interesting to see how that center field scrum defense is going to go. I think I was it's going to do a highlight video about. I might whip out a couple of stills here while I just mention on this, but it is really interesting because I think Tane is a much stauncher defender than Liner, but we've also seen Tane have a little bit of toe, so maybe he'll trust himself to be able to fill those gaps because that's ultimately what led to a lot of the indecision from Liner in 10. He was put in some really tricky situations, especially for that first one. He didn't know whether to bite in and to be able to take Chocobaras in the headgear when he went through, or to be able to feather to the outside and stick on Malia in case they went out wide. And it also talks about, it speaks to how the winger is going to defend, and they just got to make sure they stick a little bit tighter. And that is also something that other people on pods have noted, that Andrew Kellaway sits a lot deeper than Tom Wright. That might be a speed thing. That might just be a preference of his game style. But if he's going to sit that deep, he's going to have to cover a lot more ground by himself because those wingers need to be in tight, particularly off set piece defense if you're running the connected line speed, which the Wallabies are running. So that's going to be really interesting. I am just shook by the Springboks. It's like when I saw the team sheet, I actually had to take a minute to kind of observe about how big the changes were. Lachie, should we just go to the Springboks? Because now that I'm here, now I'm thinking about it, like it's bizarre. I'm shook. I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Let's let the good times roll. Let's talk box because we're already there. And if you thought there were names on the last team sheet you didn't know, try digging through this one. I had to really dig into the archives to pick apart not the team itself because a lot of the names are familiar, but the makeup of it fascinated me completely. Before we start on the box as well, I need to tip my cat and apologize. I tipped the bomb squad up front for South Africa to bend over and cop it from the All Blacks, but
Oh,
they
mate, me too. Me
absolutely
too. Yeah.
destroyed New Zealand. So apologies and commiserations. I absolutely deserve to cop that one on the chin. They were amazing, and that's some of the best scrumming I've seen.
Just
So
on that, I think that is a tremendous effort from Wilco Low in particular, but that has got to bode well for the Australians as well because we faced that front row and we didn't get bent over and lifted up like that. It's just I haven't seen an All Black scrum go to pieces like that in a very long time. We saw the South Africans do it against the British and Irish, the Irish last year when they had that 2-game series. It was it was a piece of art. It was rugby at its purest, really.
yeah, it was awesome. I love seeing big scrums and the fact that referees, at least in this circumstance, were willing to let that go and let it be a pushback. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, the less penalties blown up, the better. We want to see them march over and really rub it in. But let's get back to the team that they have named. Fascinating to see the changes in the midfield. I know we usually start with the pack, but when I opened that team list and I saw a Feinberg and Mngomezulu at 10, which is exciting. We know what he can do. He did a wonderful job through the 2024 TRC. But Damien Phillimser at 12 and Kanan Moody at 13 is just Harlem Globetrotter all out attack, razzle dazzle. Yeah. I mean, that is so exciting, but I can't imagine the flip side and the defensive opportunities it presents the All Blacks. What did you make of that, seeing those two paired in the midfield?
Yeah, the pairing in the midfield really, really interesting. Both quite tall, both lack that low center of gravity. A lot of pace and a lot of skill, a lot of distribution skill from Willemsen there at 12. Moody, a little bit more of a north-south swerving runner. I don't particularly remember seeing a step that I was like, wow, that's gonna wrong foot someone like a Billy Proctor, who's his opposite there. But you do have a little bit of a Stormers spine there with Sasha Feinberg and Gumazulu and Afaleli Fussy at fullback. So it is really interesting to see that combination. Then you've also got Grant Williams on the bench with Kobus Reinach starting. But the center pairing, I'm not convinced. I can't see how I mean, unless you've got a Sasha Feinberg and Gomazulu wrapping around a Willemse to go behind a north-south um uh Kane Moody, it just feels like I don't know where necessarily you're getting the punch that's going to worry this All Blacks backline from. In the forwards, no Eben Etzebeth anywhere on the team sheet, and you've got brought in Lou Diaga, who I thought was actually really good off the bench last week, but that was after a quiet series against the Aussies. He's obviously paired with Ruin Nokia and the big man at the back, which Jasper Visa, the best call in this side, I must say. They've lacked that number eight, the big, behemoth of a number eight, and Jasper Visa is going to bring some punch to that pack.
Yeah, this is the best looking back row for Springboks in my mind. I think they really missed that Vermeulen clone that you mentioned last week, and Visa certainly is as close to that as we can find. I think people haven't quite appreciated how good Vermeulen was until he was gone. It's one of those players like a Jerome Kane. You didn't know how good you had it until it's gone. So to see that Khaleesi back to six is excellent. And Peter Steph to toit all of his experience. I can't believe he's on 90 caps. It's just crept up. It's amazing, and the experience that you bring in with Diaga to start 70 caps, Khaleesi 95, Peter Step to 90. This is a really well balanced pack. I feel. I still think there are some tweaks that they could use, but I can't really see outside of Etzebeth missing from that starting team. This is about as close to a full strength pack as you can find.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why you've got someone like Arhe Snyman and Quagga Smith on the bench as the big forwards replacements. Wilco Low, Jan Hendrik Vessels, and Manus van der Merwe are going to try to replicate the same effort on the bench when they come on. I am with the we'll talk tactics in a while, but I just think it's interesting to see how the forward pack is stockier and less mobile than what it was, but the back line is so much more in the other direction. So are you working with a shield and sword kind of thing here with the forwards really bashing through the front door, a bit of a mallet, a mace, and then you've got the scything runs of the back line. It just feels like it doesn't it's very conventional, if I may say that. It's a very heavy pack, whereas you've got a very fleet-footed backline. So it's just very interesting. I think we'll go to the ABs now, and when you look at that sheet, you can't help but look at the debuting appearance of Leroy Carter on the wing, in for injured Imoni Narawa, who injured his ribs last game. Another sevens flyer that enters the fray. How exciting is that for the All Blacks? Because it's not like they're shy of good wingers, but this guy's special.
He is special. I couldn't wait for his All Blacks debut. I think if anyone's had the luxury of seeing him on the Sevens circuit or some of the long range tries he scored for the Chiefs this year, you'll know that he's an absolute baller. He's done it for Bay of Plenty as well, going back. So I'm excited to see what he can do. It's an interesting matchup. You debut against Cheslin Colby. That's something to write home about. So I'm very keen to see how that matchup goes. But it's a weird 23. Not in the sense that it lacks talent, but there is a lot of inexperience in key positions as well. You've got to remember, Billy Proctor's still only 7 caps in. They've continued with Simon Parker at 6. Noah Hotham returns to the starting lineup for just his 3rd cap. And then it's very light on experience in the bench by and large. So I'm keen to get your take on a team that seems full of promise, but I don't know, maybe there is something for the South Africans to exploit there. What do you reckon?
I think it starts up front. It'd be interesting to see how Lomax and Takiaho, who got bent over by the reserve bench last week, go starting this game. Obviously, Ethan de Groot, a tremendous scrummager, but it's all about how you click and how that pack settles into those contests. So it'd be really interesting to see there. I think that the Springboks should go after them there. Then I think in the second row, Scott Barrett and Tupo Vai, just elite operators last week. They easily had their wood on their counterparts, and I'd say the 2 best second rowers of the TRC so far. They've just been absolutely immense. I just noted on X, Scott Barrett's effort areas. It was skeleton Lions test 3-esque. It was dominant. It was really dominant. And then, like you've mentioned, the pack is just so good in that back row with Simon Parker really, really showing that he can cut at a test level. But It's interesting with DMAC at fullback because then you've moved Will Jordan out of his position again. And it's just, when is this guy going to get to settle into the 15 jersey, which I think Kiwis want to see. Um, Overall, this All Black side, this starting All Black side has something special about it. But you're right. It's when you start going to the bench, when you've got a Brody McAllister, very light on caps. You've got a Tamati Williams who didn't particularly excel last week, and you've got a Duplessis Karifi who's still trying to find his apex kind of influence moments in test matches. It's going to be interesting, isn't it, Lockie?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the decision around benching Finlay Christie as well. And he was well down my pecking order as an All Blacks half at the start of the year, but he performed so well against South Africa last week. It seemed a bit strange for me to change up that combination and put in Noah Hotham. So, maybe it's a bit like, what the Wallabies are doing with Edmund and O'Connor, right? It's your insurance policy off the bench, but I thought they would reward that. Quinn Tupaia is excellent coverage, and I think he changed the game with his running as well, but massive, massive responsibility now for Ruben Love if someone does go down. He's only 2 games into his test career. Another All Black that's, full of potential and sparkling feet. But yeah, I wonder whether if the Springboks are able to fatigue this side and put them under pressure, maybe they can give themselves a sniff in Wellington because, sure, they might have defended the fortress, but Wellington has not been a happy hunting ground for the ABs this past few years, Virgo.
So, Lockie, before we head to the predictions, we're just going to give a quick little preview about what we're going to see from these guys tactically from the Springboks and the All Blacks. I think for the Springboks, the biggest thing that they can make, that they're maybe trying to achieve with this change in the back line and also in the forward pack is 22 zone entry execution and coming away with points, because the amount of entries that they had into the All Blacks 22 and the amount of time that they didn't walk away with points, you can't win a top tier test match when you're putting out those kind of efficiency figures. So it was really quite poor, if we're being honest. And it's hard to win a rugby game when you get into the right part of the field, which they did through their kicking. And like Pollard was getting magical 22, 50 22s and whatnot. And then they just didn't end up doing anything with it. So I think that's going to be one part of their game. They know how to get into the right parts of the field, but consolidating that and making sure that they can try to chance their arm to score a couple of tries is what they're going to have to do, particularly there, because they had set piece dominance in the scrum. They were doing really well with their kicking game territorially and both aerially, although the All Blacks kicked a lot. And I think that's something that we can expect to see a little bit more of. How are you seeing that contest shape up?
Oh, if you don't think there's going to be kicks, you've got rocks in your head. They're playing at Wellington. You want to catch the swirl. You want to catch your opposite back three off guard. And it's a really exciting challenge. I think the Springboks will look to try and target Leroy Carter aerially on debut. There's certainly nothing wrong with his attack and his defense, and he's great on ball from that sevens background. But, high bombs aren't really something that he's known for diffusing. He's solid. He's been all right at Super Rugby. Can he handle a full-on Springbok aerial assault? So don't be surprised if they see him target that side. They're sending Cheslin Colby and the like after him. Don't be surprised if Kanan Moody gets up on him as well. So I think that's something the Springboks look to exploit. But you're right, their attack was poor in 22, and the fact that you have 2 attacking playmakers in Damien Phillips and in Sasha Farnberg and Gonazulu, that's really exciting. Plus the combinations that they have previously at club level lend me to think that they will look to chance their arms. So I'd like to see some running rugby, but I still think they'll be targeted kicking from the box. And from the All Blacks, it's a team that's kind of telling me to rinse and repeat. They managed to get it done. Their forwards were gritty. Their forwards were hard on ball, which I love to see. How do you see the Springboks, rather the All Blacks, tweaking their game, if at all, to suit Wellington?
I think the kicking is going to be the same, but I do think that their breakdown pressure is going to go up to another level. And what they did a lot last week was just make sure they get those solid hits and counter rucked. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit more of that, particularly with the likes of Samisoni Takiaho, a very powerful player. Tyra Lomax, he does know how to get his hands on the ball in the breakdown. And it feels like with an Arnie Savia, you've got Scott Barrett in such absolutely devastating form, and Tupo Vai. I think it's more just, I think their game plan is not necessarily changed, but more of what they were doing. Because I think that the way that the Springboks have picked their squad is they've got a very tall backline now. All of a sudden, it's not the little whippets on the wings. They have got serious height and aerial ability with Kane and Moody, with Damian Willems, and obviously you've got Cheslin Colby on one wing. I do believe Cheslin's still there, right? Is that correct?
It sure is.
Yeah. And then is the other wing, is that Ethan Hooker?
And that's the other thing that we've glossed over.
Yeah.
Going Ethan Hooker up against Will Jordan, and obviously the Springboks name theirs on Monday, which is still insane to me.
Yeah.
But they're putting Ethan Hooker up against the world's best attacking threat in Will Jordan. That's going to be a fascinating battle as well. So the two edges are just going to be, you're going to have to go cross-eyed keeping an eye on both of them.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be speed v speed. It's gonna be height. It's gonna be kicking game. And if the All Blacks can try to steady their set piece a little bit better, then I think that and also their discipline, because it was something that was getting a little bit sketchy in the Argentinian games. Obviously, conceded a bunch of yellow cards, and then also last week, they weren't flawless in that area. So if they can continue to work on those things, I think they should be able to get a result. And that's where we're gonna go right now. We're gonna go into the predictions, and we'll start with the Wallabies versus the Argentinians, Los Pumas in Sydney, Allianz Stadium. Weather yet to be decided, but how do you see this game going? What's the score for us, Lachie?
This is a very excruciating game to call as an Aussie fan. I think there is so much hope and goodwill behind the Wallabies at the moment off the back of good wins against South Africa and Argentina. But you can't kid yourself in saying that the Wallabies were the complete package in Townsville. They chanced their arm late and they got lucky. They played 40 good minutes. If they start like that again, I don't expect them to be able to pull it back because Los Pumas are too classy. So I certainly hope that with a good start, the Wallabies can get up. I'm expecting it to be close again. So I'm going to go with my heart and say a Wallabies win, but it's still going to be, a single digit margin, if not closer, more to the sort of 3 to 5 point range. What are you feeling in your gullet, Fergo?
The gullet says that if the Wallabies are ahead at halftime, the bench is strong enough to be able to bring it home. They've got serious impact with Bell, with Nongor now bringing that kind of impact, and Lukan Salakaia-Loto, of course, and you've got Jock, etc. So it is really, really exciting to be able to see how this is going to go. But I do think that it's going to be a very similar scoreline, even if the weather is of the kind of the greasier end of the spectrum, because we know that the Argentinians can score points, and we know that the Wallabies have been scoring points. So I think that it's going to be like a 22-18 type of score, and I do believe that the Wallabies will get it done yet again. But it is going to have to be more than a 40-minute effort, because it was not enough. It really wasn't enough until the 86th minute, 6 minutes in the red last week. So Wallabies to get it done again in Sydney, and that is going to be a hell of a party if that happens on the weekend. Now, for the All Blacks and the Springboks, who walks away with the win here? Is it going to be a 2-0 sweep to the All Blacks, or is the Springboks going to restore a little bit of the respect on the name in New Zealand after losing that game, that crunch game last week at Eden Park, not able to rob the New Zealanders of their piece of history? How do you see this one going in windy Wellington?
Oh, another hard one. I think you have to lean towards New Zealand, right? Off the back of defending the fortress, confidence is going to be high, and the South Africans have had a tough run, both home and abroad, right? They're 1 from 3. They've got pressure. They don't have their kicking general and Andre Pollard, who's out of the contest of this one. I thought his goal kicking was pivotal at Eden Park and bringing back the game and keeping them alive and in it. Um, I think you have to go for the hosts just on basis of a home ground advantage, but I expect it to be tight as well. Like we've mentioned, the Springboks pack is so powerful and so strong, but I love the combative nature of what the All Blacks and their younger guns and their newer faces are showing. So I expect it to be another epic tussle between the so-called greatest rivals, and I'm going to say All Blacks by 5.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with you. I think that it might be by a little bit more, like 10, purely for the reason that I don't believe that the Springboks can make this many changes and for it all to go to plan. We saw how many points the Wallabies could put on the All Blacks in their own backyard. The Wallabies could put on the Springboks in their own backyard at Ellis Park at altitude when they overplayed their hand. And I can't see Sasha Feinberg and Gomazulu side by side with Damon Williams, with Amani Labok on the bench, being able to right that ship in the end. If playing is going to be their Achilles heel, which it was against the Wallabies at Highveld. So I think that the All Blacks do have the game management, the players, the experience across the park and across the 23 to be able to really take it to a Springboks side, which on paper appear like they're going to overplay. And that again, like the scrummaging last week, I could be sitting here next week eating humble pie, but that is the way that I see it. There's just not enough cohesion index away from home for me to be able to confidently be able to say, yep, the Springboks are going to be able to step to the All Blacks in Wellington for this game. So I'm going to say 25-15 to the All Blacks, because we know they have points in them, and so do the Springboks, but they have a lot of threes in them, and ill discipline has cost the All Blacks of late. That's a wrap of the TRC round 4 preview. We have a bunch of rugby coming up ahead. Yesterday, I did an interview with Piper Duck of the Wallaroos as they headed into their must-win quarterfinal clash against Canada, which is just going to be an awesome game. So make sure you get your TV's alarm set to that game. It's going to be a 1 a.m. Sunday/Saturday morning time for us here in Australia on the East Coast. So make sure that you set your alarms. But Lachie, hell of a lot of rugby to enjoy. Thank you so much for coming on again and previewing what is going to be an awesome round of rugby. Enjoy that. We'll enjoy it. Everyone else, remember to enjoy your rugby. Like, subscribe here on Off the Ruck and on Scrumbags for their pod platforms, as well as get on their cheeky Instagram and accounts as well, because they do post good content there. Lachie, thank you so much for today.
Thanks, Berger. Catch you next time.
And all to you guys, enjoy the weekend of rugby. We'll catch you guys on the other side. Ciao.